to our Black in Laguna Woods, another segment of our Black in Laguna Woods program. Thank you very much for being here today and watching us. You know, the Laguna Woods Democratic Club for our July meeting has our speaker, Dr. Thomas Parham. Dr. Parham is president of California State University in Dominguez Hills, Los Angeles. He is also a psychologist, and he is also an activist. Dr. Parham he said so many insightful and thought-provoking things. And not only did he say them in an insightful, thought-provoking manner, he also said them in a almost poetic, mesmerizing way. He gave us a lot of things to talk about. So that's what we're going to do today. We have three people who are all, I believe they're all Laguna Woods residents. One of them won't be a Laguna Woods resident soon, but we'll talk about that at the end of the program. And we are going to speak about some of the things that Dr. Parham had to say, and what they mean to us, and what we think they were talking about. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to start with Dr. Fran. I'm going to ask Dr. Fran if you could just briefly introduce yourself, tell people who you are. Just tell people who you are a second, and we'll go around the table. Dr. Fran.
Okay, hello, I'm Fran Williams, Dr. Fran Williams. I'm a developmental psychologist and retired university professor, resident here in Laguna Woods.
Thank you, Dr. Fran. Debra David, you're up next. A little bit about yourself.
I'm gonna be a little bit more garrulous. I moved to Laguna Woods 11 years ago from San Jose, where I worked for 23 years at San Jose State University, which was the first Cal State in the system of the 23. And I was a professor, then directed a center for involving students in community service for academic credit and also for AmeriCorps stipends. And when I moved here, I began working in the Cal State Chancellor's Office on trying to make general education programs more engaging. Issues of race and ethnicity were a constant focus of my work. My graduate studies are in sociology, and I studied with some of the best. And you may wonder why I'm on Black in Laguna Woods, because I'm not Black. I'm Jewish, which is generally considered white now, but some white supremacists might disagree with that. And I asked for a speaker. I'm a member of the African American Committee of Laguna Woods Democratic Club, and I asked for a speaker who could suggest ways for people who are not Black to be good allies, and Dr. Fran named Dr. Parham as her first choice.
Okay, thank you, Debra. And Gloria, tell people who you are, please.
I'm Gloria Williams, and I'm a retired social worker after 40 years in the Gary, Indiana community school system. I've been in Laguna Woods, I'm into my third year and enjoying retirement. And I didn't know that retirement meant you'd be so busy, but I am a member of the African American Heritage Club and a member of the committee. I'm also a member of the Democratic Club and a member of the African American committee within this Democratic Club.
Thank you very much. And thank you all three of you, for agreeing to do this program here. We're all, as in most things in Laguna Woods, we're all volunteers, and we all have a lot to do. And I certainly appreciate you taking the time. And I also want to make clear to everybody who's watching that the three people here are going to be discussing Dr. Parham's talk today. The opinions, the thoughts, the emotions that they express are their own. They are not representing any organization or any club or any political party here in Laguna Woods, right? What you are hearing is what they think and what they saw and what they felt. So I want to get started right away. I was going through and getting ready for this program. I was going through Dr. Parham's speech again, his talk to the Laguna Woods Democratic Club. But I may have said this already, but I highly recommend anybody who hasn't seen it. It's very well worth watching. And I encourage anybody to see it. And I know some people who are watching this program might have seen it already because we're on all July just like that. It's too. but when I was going through it, it was like after about 5 minutes, I realized that almost every thought that he had expressed, and sometimes every sentence that he spoke, was in itself worthy of a half-hour conversation. So I'm not quite sure how much of what he said we're going to get through today. We may be drafting people to come back next month and finish this discussion because he did have a lot to say. I'm going to go to Dr. Parham's talk, which is the title of his talk is, what do you want to be? You want to be a passive observer or an excessive drum major? So Dr. Fran, let's start with that. And you can take that any way you want. You can answer the question, or you can decide not to answer the question and say something else. That's fine also. But what do you think Dr. Parham meant by that? And also, what does that mean to you if it means something different to you than what he said? So Dr. Fran, why don't you kick us off?
Succinctly, I think what he was speaking to was, do you want to see the issue of racism here in this country as a spectator, to treat it as one attending a spectator sport? Or do you want to get in the trenches and do what you can to work toward solving the problem? That's as simply put as I can think of for his title. What it means to me personally is I've always been in the trenches. I've also often had access to people who were not African American and to people who really didn't have a clue of what was going on, of how society kind of has created itself to address or to present these different issues. So for me, I am always a drum major for justice, and an activist. I've never taken the position where I just see what's going on or I just listen to the 6 o'clock news. I'm always doing a self-examination to see what can I do to help solve the problem.
Yeah, Debra, I'm going to go to you next. Now, obviously, you and I, Dr. Parham was talking not only just to people of color, but I think he was talking, some of the things he said were obviously directed at people who aren't people of color. And honestly, I thought some of the things he said were pointed directly at me. I don't mean me personally, but me, what I am. So that's the way I thought about it. So I'm curious about how you took that as opening title. Would you rather be an observer or a drum major?
He talked about being an authentic drum major, but not any drum major, because drum majors can be leaders for the wrong reasons. And it's important to be a leader for the right courses. You can think of for the right causes. You can think of many examples of people who are leaders and not ones that you would want to follow. MLK, Martin Luther King, wanted to be a drum major for justice and for peace. And we each have to pick our own areas where we want to be out in front of the crowd. But I'd also note that bands need people to play behind the drum major. They need drums and trumpets and flutes and other instruments. In the Democratic Club right now, as membership chair and as a member of the African American Committee, I'm more a band player than a drum major, but I have been a drum major in some of my past work, and I continue to look for opportunities to be a drum major for peace and for justice.
Thank you, Gloria. Let me ask you, what do you think of what? Let's pick up what Debra said there. Do you think that people like Debra and like myself, are we members of the band? I mean, if our heart is in the right place, and are we members of the band? Is it possible, in a fight for rights of people of color? Is it possible for people who aren't people of color to be drum majors? I'm curious as to what you think about that.
Well, you know, Allan, I will admit to sitting in judgment on that one. And I think in many cases, I might have been incorrect. I grew up, you know, in college in the 50s. And after I was married, my husband did some sit-ins, you know, with college students. And we were always, I say, spiritually active, if you want, if there's such a term, not really ignoring anything, and in our hearts really wanting. But it actually, I lived in not fear, but very cautiously and very comfortably. And I think Dr. Parham touched on that too, how you know, some African Americans have just sort of been very, very comfortable in knowing what their hearts and minds were saying, but not actively getting out there and you know, talking the talk, but not actually walking the walk. Mm-hmm. And I think I have, and he mentioned that even as seniors, there are things that we can do. We can, and I say personally, I'm growing into that, but I don't feel that I was as open-minded about people who were not of my same color taking a role in this. I think maybe I felt their conscience should have driven them to do it, and not looking around me and realizing just how maybe even passive maybe I was at times. Yeah. You know, you get into that groove of safety, and you don't really do some of those things that don't make as much noise as you could have. My own children now have asked me questions, and almost in a teasing way sometimes, calling their mom an activist. And it isn't that I'm doing so much more physically, but I think they realize how much more aware I have come of what the true situation is. I think in one of the previous interviews, I made a statement to the effect that I did not blame some, and I'll just say Caucasians, particularly, for not knowing, and I really want to call it being ignorant of, let's just call it the Black experience, because they were not taught that. What I would blame is if they were taught to hate, I would blame those people who taught them to hate. So I'm not really on the fence, but I've gotten a little bit more to the side of understanding, but at the same time, accepting my responsibility, what I could have done and what I can still do about the matter.
Yeah. So that leads me to something else. I'm going to go to Debra for this first. Something else that Dr. Parham said, which I think is kind of related. Everything he says is related, but related to what we've been talking about. One of his statements was, if you don't understand, I'm not sure who this was directed to tell you the honest truth. Everybody, I don't know. But if you don't understand racism and white supremacy, everything else around you in your life will confuse you. Right now, but this, you know, how do you take that, Debra? I mean, there's a million ways you can take that. How did you take that?
Well, I'm not sure how I took that personally, because I've been a student of this for my life, not specifically of the Black experience, but of everybody's experience and my own and others. Another thing that he said was that it's very important for us to have education, including education about ethnic studies, because there is so much ignorance out there, and it's not enough to educate people, but we need to move beyond that awareness to action for equality, for genuine equality. And he saw education as the civil rights issue of the 20th century. So I'm not speaking exactly to your point.
That's fine, no worries. That's fine. Dr. Fran, let me go to the
Yeah.
second. I'm sorry, Deborah, I didn't mean to cut you off. Did I cut you off?
Well, one
Go
other
ahead.
thing I'd like to say is I personally don't think it's appropriate for people to speak for others, to tell other people's stories. I wouldn't pretend to speak for Black Americans, or for that matter, for any other group but my own.
Okay. And Dr. Fran, I guess that that there's
Yeah.
the same statement. I'm interested in what you thought of that statement.
Okay, and understanding, I think the statement was to address everyone. I don't think that it was limited to non-Black groups. And I say that because in understanding the term racism, for example, in my mind and in my understanding, when you speak of racism, power comes into play. Looking at individuals who are in positions of power. And I know that in conversations with Black people, with white people, when they're calling somebody a racist, and this is I consider a peculiar thing to the Black community, where a Black person might call someone Black a racist. And I say, how could you be, or how could that person be a racist without power? Because you're not in a position to make decisions that affect the lives of others. I don't see a racist being able to do something like that. You have to have the power to do. You have to have the power to exert. And I think a lot of it comes from a little quick story about me. I was raised in New Orleans. I was raised a little Catholic girl. Oddly enough, in that city, we never had the color lines. So in any given community, you were likely to find both Black and white people. On my particular block, on one side was a Jewish family, on the other side was an Italian family. I learned about Seder long before I learned about any other special religious meals because of that, and learned about a number of different customs for those two cultures as I was growing up. When I started college, I was in a particular position 2 years after the segregation laws. So I started my college career at age 16 at LSU. And LSU had opened 2 years prior to that as an integrated university. And the students there were all in uproar about the whole issue of integration, segregation, racism. And so there was one particular group, and that's a club called the Newman Club. And that's the Catholic club for college and university students. They were all supportive of my being there on campus, where larger groups were far against my being there as a little Black girl attending their university. So when you talk about racism and you look at groups of people I tend to shy away from doing just that and deal more with the individual or an organization whose purpose is to exercise acts of racism rather than making sweeping judgments about people in groups. And I think it's helped me along the way.
You know, one of the things that caught my attention that Dr. Parham said is that one of his definitions of at least part of racism, Gloria, I'm going to ask you to comment on this, is number one, he said racism is a white problem.
Right.
And he said, I think he was dealing with power on that. And he said one of the segments of racism is the power to define other people. So,
Right.
Gloria, do you think that that's correct?
Yeah, Allan, and back to what Dr. Fran said about power. I can remember, as a child, things that was said to me by my own family about whites. I'll give an example. Our children usually are just so warm and friendly toward everyone. And on one occasion, my mother would repeat the story about how I was attempting to speak to a Caucasian family, and they just totally, either ignored me or rebuffed my efforts to be friendly. And I was said then, that's okay. Don't bother. You don't have to speak to poor white folks. That was the terminology. Yeah. And to me, growing up, it was a safety issue of not going where I was not wanted, not speaking to those by whom I would probably be, rebuffed or rejected. And to me, although there was no real power, except maybe something that was a power that would be exerted over my young mind, which might have stayed with me for many, many years. I don't know, maybe subconsciously I might have carried this with me. So I think if we really want to look at, the broad definition of racism, I think it does exist within some of us as Blacks. And Dr. Parham said so many things that, we could take as mantras, as affirmations, or whatever you want to call them. But one of the things he had was these three questions that I think he said we need to take with ourselves that can help to govern our actions. And they were, who am I? Am I who I say I am? Am I all I ought to be? And certainly not denying, and I think he brought this up too, all of the injustices that have been put upon Black Americans, not denying any of that, but looking, inward at ourselves, doing some introspection about what is my role in this. And as you said, he just touched on so many areas that sometimes I felt like I was in a classroom almost and wish that I were. And going over this again, listening to him, picking up on these points, it was really stirring, some emotions and some memories and my own outlook on things. And for him to say too that none of this is truly new. You remember he mentioned all the places where these things are going on now, and they, as they say, they've just come home to rest again, right in our lap. The big difference being they were being caught on candid camera as they happened. I had lived with the stories of word of mouth things, but my children and grandchildren now can really see them. But I digress. But I just want to say that I feel that those questions about, who am I? If I could really answer those questions, that would color really maybe some of the thoughts that I had, or recolor some of the thoughts that I had, as a child that were really sort of ingrained and governed my actions, because, things were practically the same all during my early childhood, youth, and early adulthood.
Thank you. And don't worry about digressing. We like digression is good, Gloria. Debra, we got time constraints as always. You're going to have the last word. Sorry, Dr. Fran. And you got to keep it to about a minute. So I guess the same question. We'll pick up wherever you want. But do you think racism is a white problem primarily? And do you agree that part of it is the power to define other people? So, Debra, what do you think?
Well, I think eliminating racism is predominantly a white problem, or not just a white problem, a problem of people, all people, but especially people who aren't Black or other marginalized groups. But I also think it's possible to internalize a lot of the racist ideas. You know, if it's been defined, if your group has been defined in a negative way, some people take it to heart, and some people actually accept the racist ideas. One of the important things is for people to learn not to reject their own heritage and their own race and their own backgrounds.
Yeah, thank you very much. Dr. Fran, I'm sorry, we have run out of time, and Dr. Fran's not going to get to speak on this because I have something to say about Dr. Fran. I need a minute or two to do that for. But I want to thank, before I do that, I just want to thank everybody for being here and expressing their opinions and giving us their feelings. It's eye-opening and it's educational, and it's a real service to everybody. And as far as this conversation is concerned, I'm going to lobby that we do the second part of this, because I think we really scratch the surface of what Dr. Parham has to say. We'll try to draft all of you into coming back next month. I know it might not be possible, but we'll do that. But what I want to say is I have good news and I have bad news about Dr. Fran Williams, who I know a lot of you people watching this program know. Dr. Fran is getting married. I've been told she's getting married in December. I'm not sure about that. So on behalf of myself and certainly everybody here, I just want to wish Dr. Fran the best luck. I don't know if it's the best of luck, but all good wishes, and wishes for, you know, all the happiness that you could, or that a human being could possibly stuff into a life. I hope you have that in your married life. I really do. I really do. But beyond that, that's the good news. The bad news for us is that Dr. Fran, after 6 or 7 years here in Laguna Woods, is going to relocate. She's going to start a new married life in a new married place. And that is a real blow to all the people who live in Laguna Woods, even the people that don't know Dr. Fran, don't know what she does. I've known her. I haven't known her a long time, maybe a year, worked on this for about a year. She's a constant fountain of ideas, of wisdom, of thoughts, and she's also a constant fountain of connections. Dr. Fran knows everybody. Dr. Parham, I suggest that people, even if you don't want to watch Dr. Parham's talk, just watch the beginning of it. He talks about his friend, Fran Williams, and he really sums her up certainly better than I can. But one of the things he said is, in this community, not just Laguna Woods, in this area, when Dr. Fran asks you to do something, you have a 2-word answer: where and when. And the whole community is going to miss Dr. Fran, is personally going to miss what she's done. And those of us that know her personally are going to miss her, not just professionally for all that she brings to our community, but also for her as a person. You know, you got to let the kids go. So you know, we wish you nothing but happiness and good fortune. And we hope to see you again. And I know you're leaving, but I'm going to try to draft you for next month. I'm preparing you all. I'm going to try to draft you to finish this conversation. But we're at a time right now. Dr. Fran, really, congratulations. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for your ideas and everything you have contributed. Like that. Thank you.